Keith Drage, WA Sandalwood. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, Paul.
Awesome, mate. Great to have you on board. Just to give our listeners a bit of understanding of your business. Where did you start, and what's the journey, and where are you now?
Well, that is a couple of questions that scope for us some 22 years. We began in 2001. WA Sandalwood was conceived between myself and my business partner, Ron Mulder. And really, the concept behind the business was a fairly simple one, in that West Australian sandalwood is a native tree to the wheat belt of WA. It's been harvested as a wild product out of that region for some 150, 160 years. But like many commodities and resources, it's been overdone until there's a semi-depletion event. And the idea that we could begin to develop plantation-grown sandalwood to then be grown and placed into an existing marketplace was the key concept. And really, I saw it as just joining a few dots, really. So very simplistically, if you take a native tree and you put it back where it used to grow, and you're looking to grow it and sell it into an existing market, that sounds incredibly simple. Naturally enough, things are never that simple. And you get and learn your scar tissue along the way. But where it's taken us to now is over the first 10 years of our life. Really, the investment into our development projects came mainly from sophisticated investors, high net worths, that reach back more to my old financial markets era. And that, coupled with Ron's knowledge around tree planting in the wheat belt, which he originally developed for arresting salinity and soil erosion for the farming community. When we put those two things together, we did these kind of smaller scale offerings, then moved into ASIC lodged unlisted public companies, never went down the managed investment scheme route for varying reasons. And then really the big step for us was to become, corporate grade or institutional grade, which required a lot of effort to become certified by a forestry standard that was globally accepted, and is really a first box tick for any institutional investment. We wrote our first institutional deal in 2010 and have been writing those since. And fast forwarding the last 12 years, where we've got to now, the exciting stage really, with the patience of Job along the way, is we are now, I would call it a sales-driven business now, whereby we're harvesting product, we are processing product, we're selling product. And that puts you in a very different place to being, a developer of plantations where realization events are a long way out. Now we're there, which also leads to proof of concept. So from an investment aspect, we're still very much open for business on that front, and obviously have proof of concept now as an asset class.
Fantastic. So when you summarize it like that, it sounds like a very short, simple journey. But as you say, it's taken many, many years.
Yep.
And I dare say many frustrations along the way.
Yep.
What are some of the bigger ones that you've struggled with personally, or the business has struggled with to get through?
I think, the elephant in the room for us on that is, and without getting overly political about it, is that the West Australian government, along with some national initiatives, was very supportive of plantation development way back when. Our biggest competitor in the market space is the West Australian government through the Forest Products Commission. And they operate on a very different level to us because they have a right to resource on Crown land. They haven't had to buy land, they haven't had to maintain trees, they haven't had to go through any of the expenditure that we as plantation owners do. And essentially, they have the ability to put high quality product into the market at extremely competitive prices. And that creates a distorted marketplace, and it's also a very there's very little transparency in the marketplace itself. So that would be my number one frustration, and it still sits. More generally within our own business, I think it's just simply that if you're growing, even if you're growing a native tree where it used to come from, the idiosyncrasies around soil type, location choice, rainfall, plantation design, provenance of seed. There are so many contributing factors to what is ultimately a successful and productive system. And is there quicker ways to get there? Perhaps. You might argue that it's the patience you need to learn by your mistakes on the way, because there's nothing we do today that's the same as we did 20 years ago. That is the nature of a business of this sort. You do need to learn and improve and continually evolve. But I think if I could summarize, what would I do differently there? Possibly earlier in the piece, and hindsight, of course, is a wonderful thing. We would probably have looked to have accessed capital or funds of some nature. I mean, obviously, we're not a listed business. To perhaps accelerate our learning curve by bringing in maybe a bit of kind of advisory consultant opinion earlier in the piece. Now, whether that would truly have enabled us to accelerate our learnings or not, I don't know, but we run a very lean business, and by that you need to be patient and learn along the way.
Oh, absolutely. And how did, like, sort of given there's the two of you as partners in the business, so to speak, how do you two get along, and how do you keep that relationship fresh and focused and energized?
Well, it's like an old married couple, isn't it? And and we are in many ways, we're quite different people in many ways, but then I would, and I'm sure Ron would also agree, that makes us complementary as a team. I mean, the underlying thing you must have, like in any long-term relationship like that, is a real passion for the common denominators, and that is something we completely share. Whether it's from just the core commodity story and growing something that really has a kind of bit of a nature's wonderment about it. We're both passionate about that. We're both passionate about the history of sandalwood and the Indigenous side, and we have a very active JV with an Indigenous group in the Gibson Desert, the Martu people, through to the environmental side, which Ron was always involved in for the salinity challenges I mentioned earlier. So I think there's never been any parting of the thinking around why we're here, what are we doing this for? But like in all business relationships, you don't necessarily always see the same thing at the same time and push in exactly the same direction. And that's where you have to recognise your own skill sets. And I think we've both understood that as you grow, you need to bring other resource in with other expertise. And through that, almost kind of, that counselling and benchmarking and just responding to fresh thoughts and ideas, 9 times out of 10, when something is put in front of us, we have exactly the same thought about it, because it comes back to what's best for the business, what's best for us as to where we want to go. And it's recognising your own weaknesses to some degree.
That's a big part of business recognition, isn't it? Yeah. And in terms of future direction for your business, like you've hit a commercial space at the moment after years of pushing through to get to that point. Where do you see it in, say, maybe 10 years' time?
Well, we have always, when we started out, the core goal was to try and grow the best trees we could grow in that Australian sandalwood space. I'd still like to think that's obviously a key target for our business as a whole. But what has evolved over time is at both the front end and the back end of that process. We want to be a leader in the research and development around better practice, whether it's sourcing of seed and seed provenance, which will ultimately raise productivity gains, whether it's around certain establishment techniques and efficiencies, but ultimately we want to grow bigger and better trees, obviously.
Yep.
But I think overall, we've realised we want to be a multi-product integrated forestry platform. And by that I mean that is everything from that front end, could be nursery, through to establishment, through to maintenance, through to harvesting, through to processing, and then product development. And I think that's the exciting bit, to be in the downstream processing, but also look at those upstream opportunities in a space that we know well. You know, we would look at other forest products and are indeed doing so. And we do have a model that has a more of an integrated investment play, where we purchase land and we have a cropping and forestry play on the mosaic of soils that you get in the part of the world we're in. So I think, you know, in summary, it is to be that fully integrated forestry platform.
Yep.
And there's so much R&D. I can't tell you how much, for me personally, when I look at the systems we develop, there are 9 or 10 natural products that come off them, between leaf materials, bark materials, seed, and the standard products for the wood. All of them have fabulous chemistry. They all, as many Australian natives do, the amount of actual research that has been done and then commercialized is very low. And my kind of dream out of that would be that on a sandalwood plantation system, that you're utilizing every single forest product that comes off of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And do you think you'll hit that point?
Look, we're knocking them off slowly. Obviously, you know, our main game is about growing good trees, getting good wood tonnage, and good grades within that harvest. But, you know, we have a host tree, for example, that is critical to growing the sandalwood. That's Acacia acuminata. That tree in itself has some really good applications in certain marketplaces. It also has some quite extraordinary chemistry in its leaf and bark material. And so we have active R&D programs there. The nuts and the oil you can distill or extract from the nuts is a cosmetic product that we already have a business line in. So, you know, it's the old, don't lose focus on what your main game is, but there are some really fabulous opportunities. And as we grow and as our bottom line grows, we're able to reach deeper into those opportunities.
So, talking growth, what do you attribute your growth to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're in quite an unusual space. I mean, Australian sandalwood is bespoke. I think we have grown and become got a decent foothold in the institutional space, and I put that down to reliability of service. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to play in the institutional space, they need to see track record. There are certain box ticks you've got to do, but box ticking and performing don't necessarily come together. So I think reliability and consistency of performance over a long time has really helped us to reach further into that institutional space. I also think, though, that compared to 10 or 15 years ago, you know, it really was such an unknown frontier. You know, could you truly plant Santalum spicatum, as our species is known, and grow a commercial product in a 15 to 20 year time horizon? You know, the desktop said probably, but it wasn't until maybe 12, 14 years in, we could do proper R&D that actually said, yeah, you've got you really do have a commercial product here that underwrites the model that you've written. So, you know, I think that overall that proof of concept has allowed us to grow the business further. And, you know, we're a naturally ESG focus type business. The very nature of what we do sort of puts us in that space. So we're very kind of on topic from that perspective. A lot of the other environmental benefits you see, the return of native fauna in certain areas that weren't there from when it was previously cleared, the land was cleared. So I think there's a lot of kind of layers coming onto our type of investment exposure these days that are complementary to what the institutional world wants to see.
So you are a significant player in your industry. You have grown a significant business. You know, it's a real success story. And I'd say from what you're telling me, and please confirm this, that you've taken risk, but it's been well thought out risk and well mitigated.
I'd like to 100% concur with that if I can, if I could. But of course, I would say that I'd like to think all those things were true, and I think they mostly are. If I look back, are there some things we could have done differently and made better decisions? Yes. I do think, you know, if you're a small to medium business owner, you've got to have some level of risk appetite anyway. And it's got to be, you don't go into business for yourselves without having an appetite for risk. However, I think whilst debt can be a friend at times, we've always been very careful not to over leverage the business, particularly when our turnaround time for success is so long led. I mean, really, we put something in the ground and you're not getting too much out of it for 15, 18, 20 years. Carrying a lot of debt through that is obviously problematic. So we have been prudent in terms of not being over leveraged. We have taken risks, but largely they've been understood. And I think the key is often, you know, they often say the first cut is the cheapest when a position goes wrong. And I think that's one thing we have to recognise, you know, taking a foray down a certain tangent that looked great at the time, recognising early enough when that foray is not going to yield the type of result you had hoped. I think that's critical to cut back at that point, but it shouldn't stop you still embracing those tangents.
So the speed of being able to adjust your plan when something doesn't work out the way you thought.
Well, and you do have to be nimble. I think being
absolutely
business is critical.
Yeah. Awesome. Last question from me, Keith. What's the one bit of advice you'd give somebody starting out in business?
Well, coming from the corporate background myself originally, there's always the wonderful kind of grass is greener, you know, owning your own business must be great, you know. Think about the flexibility in my life I'll have, think about the amount of holidays I can take, etc., etc. I think owning your own business and following a dream and a passion is something that is fantastic, and I would encourage everybody that's of that mind to have a look at. But it comes with a big red flag next to it, which is once a business owner, it's 24/7, 365 days a year. Until you can get to the point in which hopefully that business is successful enough that the founders can step away and it becomes a management-led business. And that is the evolution that we're going through currently. But in those early days, you simply don't have the infrastructure around you. You know, you have to become a master of all things, which of course is virtually impossible. And if you're not careful, your vision and your time gets dragged down into the weeds of the business and you just can't get out. So I do think setting foot down that pathway is something I'd encourage, but with a warning flag, and having support infrastructure around you at the earliest possible time you can do that really is what allows you to then flourish with the original idea and energy.
So you've obviously made it out of the depths of your business. So it's a true success story, yeah?
Yes, we are. We're just coming out the other end of that, having appointed a new chief executive officer back in November. So it's becoming that management-led business with Ron and I. moving more to a board level. However, what we can perform within the business and where we have most value, we would argue, is in that both investment sales and product sales. Ron and I have now pretty much 50 years of sandalwood experience between us. So whether it's talking to investors or talking to end buyers of product, that's where we feel we can add most value to the business currently.
And if somebody listening to this is an investor or an end product buyer, you're the person to contact?
Absolutely. Please contact myself. Absolutely. 100%.
Fantastic. Keith, really appreciate your time and thanks for coming on.
No problem. Good to speak to you, Paul. Thank you.